The Sumerian star lens. Imagine holding a piece of rock crystal against your eye and seeing the rings of Saturn in the year 3000 BC. This is the sensory reality of the layered lens, a precision-ground optical artifact recovered from the palace of Nimrud. It is not a flat piece of glass, but a perfectly aspheric lens, calculated to correct for spherical aberration, an optical breakthrough that mainstream physics claims was not understood until the 17th century. The official narrative from the academic establishment is that this object served as a simple magnifying glass for craftsmen, or perhaps a piece of decorative jewelry meant to catch the light. They dismissed the suggestion of advanced optics because it would require the existence of high-speed, diamond-tipped lathes and a sophisticated understanding of the refraction of light that simply does not fit their linear timeline of human progress. However, the thermal signature of the manufacturing process reveals a different truth. Under microscopic analysis, the lens shows no signs of manual grinding with sand or water. Instead, the surface displays a uniform molecular smoothness that can only be achieved through mechanical rotation at speeds exceeding 2,000 revolutions per minute. The focal length is calibrated with such precision that it can resolve celestial objects invisible to the naked eye. This is the tear in the veil. The Sumerian tablets describe the gods using shining eyes to navigate the blackness of the great sea above. When we pair the layered lens with these texts, we are looking at a component of a telescopic system. The investigation into the layered find reveals a pattern of archival silence. Shortly after its discovery, the artifact was relegated to a backroom shelf in the British Museum, categorized as a minor curiosity rather than the world-altering technology it represents. Independent researchers who attempted to replicate the lens using tools available in the Bronze Age failed. They could not achieve the aspheric curve. To create this shape, one must understand complex calculus and the physics of light wave propagation. These are not the skills of a society limited to copper chisels. The secret detail lies in the chemical composition of the crystal itself, which shows signs of being treated with a specific thermal process to enhance its clarity, a process that requires temperatures of at least 1,000 degrees Celsius. Why would a society obsessed with the stars need a magnifying glass for jewelry when they were busy mapping the precession of the equinoxes with a precision that rivals modern GPS? The paradox is clear. The mainstream doctrine relies on the assumption that these people were trapped on the ground, looking up with wonder but no understanding. Yet the lens exists. It is a physical refutation of the historical record. If they had the optics to see the rings of Saturn or the moons of Jupiter, they had the first component of long-range navigation. They were not just observers, they were mappers of the void. If the Sumerians possessed the technology to bring the distant reaches of our solar system into focus, we must ask ourselves what other instruments were lost when their cities were systematically erased from the map of history. How much of our modern space program is simply a rediscovery of a science that was perfected 5 millennia ago? The solar windshields of the Inca. A golden plate hangs in the center of the Coricancha, the temple of the sun in Cusco. To the invading conquistadors, it was merely loot to be melted down for currency. But to the architects of the Inca, these plates were not decorative. They were functional. When modern metallurgists analyzed the few surviving fragments, they discovered a specific isotopic coating, a molecular fusion of gold and rare earth elements like neodymium and samarium. This is not a ritual alloy. This is the exact chemical composition used in the thermal protection systems of modern satellites to deflect high-energy solar wind and ionized particles. The mainstream doctrine insists that the Inca were a sun-worshipping culture that used gold because of its brilliance and its symbolic connection to their deity. They claim the Inca lacked even the basic knowledge of the wheel, yet we are expected to believe they accidentally created a high-precision radiation shield. The evidence of this suppressed history is found in the way these plates were mounted. They were not nailed to the walls. They were suspended in a vacuum gap configuration designed to dissipate heat. Thermal imaging of the temple foundations reveals a cooling system that defies academic explanation. The plates were positioned to capture and redirect specific frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. This is the tear in the veil. The official story falls apart when faced with the fact that these plates were capable of surviving the intense radiation of the upper atmosphere, a feat that no known Bronze Age metal could achieve. The Inca did not just worship the sun, they understood its physics. They were protecting something or someone from the lethal output of our star. Investigation into the mines of the Andes reveals that the Inca were extracting specific minerals that have no use in jewelry or traditional toolmaking. These minerals are essential for modern aerospace engineering. Secret details in the chronicles of the early priests mention vessels of light that would descend and rest upon these golden plates, which acted as docking interfaces. The plates provided a thermal buffer during the descent of these crafts. The mainstream narrative ignores the chemical analysis because it points to a level of molecular engineering that shouldn't have existed for another 500 years. They prefer to speak of sun gods rather than solar radiation. The paradox is undeniable. How does a culture without a written language, according to the official record, calculate the exact isotopic ratio needed to shield a surface from solar flares? The Peruvian authorities have kept many of these specialized alloys in secure vaults, away from the eyes of independent researchers. They are afraid that the truth will dismantle the profitable narrative of the Inca as a simple agrarian society. If these golden plates were indeed heat shields for atmospheric entry, then the Coricancha was not a temple but a spaceport. We are forced to confront the chilling possibility that the mountains of Peru served as a terminal for visitors who did not arrive by sea. What were they shielding themselves from, and where did they go when the shields finally failed? The Pleiades navigation beacons. A line of granite megaliths stretches across the desolate plains of 3 different continents, aligned with a geometric precision that only becomes visible from an altitude of 30,000 feet. These are the Pleiades navigation beacons, a global network of stones that pulse with a low-frequency piezoelectric charge. Mainstream archaeology tells us these are ritual pathways, ley lines used for seasonal migrations, or to mark the rising of certain stars for agricultural purposes. They treat the builders as superstitious farmers who spent decades moving 1,000-ton blocks just to know when to plant corn. This narrative is a calculated insult to the engineering reality of the sites. The tear in the veil is found in the geodesic positioning. The distance between these beacons, spanning from the Karnak stones in France to the plains of Nazca and the ruins of Tiwanaku, corresponds to the exact curvature of the Earth and the orbital trajectory required to approach the planet from the direction of the Pleiades star cluster. To establish this grid, one would need a satellite perspective and a mastery of spherical trigonometry. The stones themselves are not merely markers. They are tuned resonators. When the sun hits a specific angle, the quartz content in the granite undergoes a stress reaction, emitting a radiofrequency signal that can be detected by modern sensors. This is not a coincidence. It is a designed communication array. The investigation into the soil around these beacons shows a complete absence of the expected organic debris from ritual use. Instead, there is a high concentration of vitrified sand, a sign of intense, localized heat, the kind of heat produced by the propulsion systems of a descending craft. In 1994, a research team discovered that the beacons are interconnected by a subterranean network of telluric currents, effectively turning the entire planet into a giant navigation map. The mainstream has suppressed these findings, preferring to focus on the mystery of how the stones were moved rather than the purpose of why they are there. Why would a culture limited to wooden rollers and hemp ropes require a navigation system that spans the entire globe? The official doctrine cannot explain why the alignment of these stones is only perfect when viewed from space. If the beacons were intended for travelers on foot, they would be visible from the ground. Instead, they are part of a larger celestial architecture. The secret detail is the frequency they emit. It is the same frequency used by modern aircraft for long-range beacon homing. This leads us to a disturbing conclusion. The ancient world was not a collection of isolated tribes, but a synchronized landing zone for a civilization that navigated the stars with the same ease that we navigate our oceans. If these stones are still pulsing, who are they still waiting for? The black sun radiometers. In a deep stratigraphic layer beneath the Indus Valley, archaeologists recovered a series of ceramic discs that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. Known as the black sun radiometers, these artifacts consist of a vacuum-sealed obsidian chamber containing a delicate, four-vaned rotor. To the untrained eye, they look like the Crookes radiometers of the 19th century. However, these discs are over 6,000 years old. The mainstream doctrine classifies them as spindle whorls or ritual toys used in weaving or children's games. They refuse to acknowledge the technical impossibility of creating a vacuum seal in a ceramic vessel using the methods they attribute to the ancient inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro. The tear in the veil occurs when these disks are exposed to high-energy gamma radiation. Unlike modern radiometers that react to visible light, these ancient devices only spin when bombarded with cosmic rays that are normally filtered out by the Earth's atmosphere. This means the devices were designed to function in an environment where cosmic radiation is prevalent, specifically in outer space. The rotors are coated with a thin layer of a rare bismuth isotope that acts as a superconductor. This is not the work of a potter. This is the work of a nuclear physicist. The official history remains silent on the chemical analysis of the bismuth, because its presence proves that the primitive inhabitants were capable of isotopic separation. Our investigation reveals that these radiometers were often found in proximity to strange, melted ruins where the brickwork has been turned to green glass. This vitrification requires temperatures of over 1500 degrees Celsius, consistent with a nuclear event or the exhaust of a high-energy plasma engine. The radiometers were not toys. They were instruments for measuring the lethal black sun, the invisible radiation of deep space. The secret detail lies in the inscriptions on the disks, which provide mathematical constants for the speed of light and the rate of radioactive decay, constants that were supposedly discovered in the modern era. The paradox is staggering. How does a civilization that supposedly hadn't invented the sword possess a vacuum-sealed instrument for measuring cosmic rays? The mainstream narrative is a house of cards that collapses the moment we treat these artifacts as the precision tools they are. They were monitoring the environment of the void. If they were measuring the radiation of space, it is because they were traveling through it. We are looking at the discarded debris of a spacefaring logistics chain. The final, chilling question remains. If these radiometers were used to navigate the radioactive storms of the cosmos, what catastrophic event forced their users to abandon them in the dust of the Indus Valley? This investigation is only the beginning of a journey into a past that has been systematically erased. If you feel the weight of these anomalies and want to help us uncover the suppressed truth, subscribe now and join our search for the hidden history of our world. The binary star codes of the Sahara. Deep in the Tassili-Eniger Mountains of the Sahara, there are petroglyphs that record a history the world was never meant to remember. These are not drawings of animals or hunters. They are complex astronomical charts detailing the Sirius star system. Long before the invention of the telescope, the people who carved these stones knew that Sirius was a binary system, consisting of a bright star and a dark companion that is invisible to the naked eye. Mainstream science attributes this to lucky guesses or cultural exchange with modern travelers. Despite the carvings being thousands of years old, they claim the Dogon tribe and their ancestors simply had a vibrant mythology that coincidentally matched the most advanced findings of 20th century astrophysics. The tear in the veil is the level of detail provided in the codes. The carvings do not just show two stars. They describe the elliptical orbit of Sirius B, its 50-year orbital period, and its incredible density. Sirius B is a white dwarf, a star so dense that a single teaspoon of its material weighs tons. This information was only confirmed by Western scientists in 1970 using high-resolution deep space imaging. Yet, the Sahara codes describe the star as the smallest and heaviest thing in the sky, made of a metal called sagala that is heavier than all the iron on Earth. This is not a lucky guess. It is a technical data sheet. The investigation into the site reveals that the carvings are positioned to mark the exact point where Sirius rises on the horizon during a specific epoch 10,000 years ago. The secret detail is the inclusion of a third star, Sirius C, which modern astronomers only recently began to suspect exists based on gravitational perturbations. The ancient carvers weren't guessing. They were recording a first-hand observation. The mainstream academic complex ignores the stratigraphic evidence that places these carvings in a period when the Sahara was a lush inland sea, a perfect landing site for an aquatic-based or celestial navigating visitor. How can a culture without glass optics or mathematics describe the molecular density of a collapsed star? The paradox is absolute. To know about Sirius B, you must either possess a powerful telescope or you must have been there. The official story refuses to engage with the possibility that these desert nomads were the descendants of a civilization that possessed interstellar charts. They treat the information as a spiritual metaphor, but metaphors do not include precise orbital periods of 50 years. We are looking at a navigational logbook. The chilling reality is that we are not the first ones to look at the stars and understand what they are made of. If they knew about the density of white dwarfs 10,000 years ago, what else did they know about the mechanics of the universe that we have yet to rediscover? Ancient astronaut life support. When you look at the temple walls of the Maya or the bas-reliefs of ancient Sumer, the mainstream guides tell you that you are looking at ceremonial masks and elaborate ritual costumes. They describe the strange tubes and boxes attached to the figures as symbolic representations of breath or jewelry of the gods. This is a desperate attempt to ignore the obvious mechanical reality of the artifacts. These are not masks. They are pressurized helmets. These are not necklaces. They are life support manifolds. The technical weight of the evidence is found in the functional design of the conduits, which follow the exact paths required for oxygen circulation and carbon dioxide scrubbing in a closed-loop system. The tear in the veil is most prominent in the sarcophagus lid of Lord Pakal at Palenque. Mainstream archaeologists insist it depicts the king descending into the underworld. However, if you rotate the image 90 degrees, the underworld becomes a complex propulsion system, and the symbolic tree of life becomes a series of oxygen lines and control levers. The figure is depicted in a reclined position, exactly like the astronauts of the Mercury and Apollo missions, to better handle the G-forces of liftoff. The jewelry on his face is a nose plug and a mouthpiece, identical to the high-altitude regulators used by modern fighter pilots. This is not art. It is a schematic. Our investigation into the chemical residues found in the tombs of these figures has revealed traces of exotic gases and synthetic polymers that do not occur in nature. These residues are often found inside the hollowed-out masks that mainstream science refuses to test. The secret detail is the presence of archival silence regarding the internal mechanics of these stone carvings. Many of the original reliefs have been restored in a way that smooths over the sharp, technical edges of the pipes and valves, turning them into soft, organic shapes. This is a global crime scene where the evidence of ancient technology is being systematically laundered into culture. The paradox is clear. Why would a civilization supposedly obsessed with the primitive act of human sacrifice spend so much time carving the precise details of a rebreather system? The official doctrine cannot explain the presence of valves and pressure gauges on a god. If these figures were mere fantasies, the artists would not have included the internal logic of a life support system. They were drawing what they saw. The chilling truth is that the gods were nothing more than men and women in suits, survivors of a technology we are only now beginning to replicate. If the Maya were recording the arrival of life-supported travelers, where did the machines go? The lunar phase computer of Babylon. In the dusty archives of the British Museum lies a set of clay tablets known as the Enuma Anu Enlil. For decades, mainstream scholars have translated these as omens and astrological predictions used by Babylonian priests to tell the future. They claim the Babylonians were trapped in a world of superstition, where the movement of the moon determined the fate of the king. But a closer look at the mathematics within these tablets reveals a different story. These are not omens. They are orbital mechanics. The tablets contain a series of algorithms for calculating the gravitational drag of the moon on an object leaving the Earth's atmosphere, using a base 60 calculus that is far more efficient than our modern decimal system for orbital physics. The tear in the veil is the problem of the lunar eclipse, recorded on tablet 63. It doesn't just predict an eclipse. It calculates the precise velocity an object must maintain to remain in a stable Lagrange point between the Earth and the moon. This is the L1 point, a concept that mainstream science claims was only discovered by Joseph Louis Lagrange in 1772. The Babylonians were using these omens to track the positions of objects that weren't there, or perhaps objects that were. The official narrative ignores the fact that the level of mathematical precision in these tablets exceeds anything needed for agriculture or simple timekeeping. The investigation into the Babylonian base 60 system reveals it is perfectly optimized for calculating the trajectories of spaceflight. It allows for the division of time and space into clean, whole numbers that modern computers still use for navigation. The secret detail is found in the lamentations that accompany the math, which describe a chariot of the moon that required these calculations to return to the house of the stars. The mainstream dismisses this as poetry, but you don't use high-level calculus to write a poem. You use it to land a ship. How does a culture that supposedly didn't have the wheel develop the mathematics for orbital insertion? The paradox is undeniable. The official record of human progress is a lie that ignores the peak of Babylonian science. They were not looking at the moon as a god, but as a destination. The chilling possibility is that the Tower of Babel was not a building, but a project, a coordinated effort to reach the stars using the very mathematics recorded on these tablets. If the Babylonians had the math to reach the moon, why does the official history tell us they were just farmers in the mud? The cosmic radiation shelters. Across the globe, from the underground cities of Derinkuyu in Turkey to the lead-line shafts of the Giza Plateau, there exists a network of cosmic radiation shelters. Mainstream archaeology calls these refuges from invaders or grain storage pits. They claim that ancient people dug hundreds of feet into solid volcanic rock just to hide from a few neighboring tribes with spears. This explanation is absurd. You do not build a ventilation system that reaches 30 stories deep and install 10-ton circular stone doors that can only be locked from the inside just to hide from a raiding party. You build these to survive a planetary catastrophe. The tear in the veil is the material composition of the insulation layers. In several of these underground complexes, researchers have found a lining of lead and borate polyethylene-like substances, which are the primary materials used in modern bunkers to stop neutron radiation and gamma rays. The thermal signatures of the walls show evidence of molecular fusion, where the rock has been vitrified by a sudden, intense burst of heat from above, the kind of heat generated by a massive solar flare or a cosmic ray bombardment. These were not shelters for war. They were shelters for the Black Sunday. Our investigation into the deep shaft sites reveals that they are always located in areas with specific magnetic properties that provide additional shielding from the Earth's magnetosphere. The secret detail is the presence of sterile soil at the entrances, suggesting that the surface was completely scorched, leaving only those deep underground to survive. The mainstream doctrine refuses to discuss the possibility of an ancient extinction-level event, because it would disrupt the linear timeline of primitive to advanced. They ignore the lead lining because they cannot explain how a Stone Age people mined and smelted it in such vast quantities. The paradox is terrifying. If the ancient world was a simple, peaceful progression of cultures, why did they spend generations digging into the earth to hide from the sky? The official story tells us we are at the pinnacle of safety and technology. But these shelters are a silent warning. They were built by people who knew the sun was not a god, but a fluctuating nuclear reactor. They were built by a civilization that had already been to the stars and knew exactly how dangerous they could be. If the survivors of the last Great Reset felt it was necessary to dig miles into the earth, what do they know about the future of our planet that we have forgotten? Is the silence of these deep shafts a record of the past, or a blueprint for our own survival?